Good morning and welcome to the special Tuesday edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Every country, every nation looks forward to the budget with the government. The budget can be growth oriented, it can provide relief to the people, it can assert its soft power as an aid giving power or hard power as more expenditure on defense. It can cater to the growth of agriculture, industry, innovation, education, health facilities, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So that is why people look towards budget with anxiety and with hope, desperation, as well as fear is also there. The federal government of Canada did not present a budget last year. As a result, the things were just carrying on. The importance of the budget can be gauged from the fact that if the opposition can somehow or the other, without the government agreeing, make any change or reduce any expenditure by even $1, is a vote of no confidence. So you can understand the importance of the budget. And as expected, this government presented a budget recently, and all the pages are covered with red ink. This year alone, the government forecasting is $154.7 billion. 154. Are there any redeeming features as well? Okay. If the deficit is so much and the growth can overtake the deficit, that's perfectly fine. If it can equal deficit, acceptable. But if there's no growth and the budget expenditure leaves a deficit to the tune of $154.7 billion, then there's something to be concerned about. It shows the budget. When I read the budget, I was amazed. High level of spending, high level of borrowing for years to come. The government is in fact making the whole generation a debtor generation. A generation, not only this, but the coming generations, to be in perpetual debt. And that is shocking. The high level of spending and borrowing does not have any long-term strategy for balancing the budget. Okay, forget balancing of the budget. There's no evidence even of economic growth. Now, this included several new spending items, such as there's a 3-year stimulus plan and a $30 billion national daycare strategy for a 5-year period. Looks good. But while much of the stimulus spending is temporary in nature, National Day Care represents a permanent program that will substantially increase government spending and add to the federal budget. And as I said, if you look at the budget, it will be spending net $475.6 billion. And if I compare it to last budget, because one year there was no budget at all. So, compared to the last budget, the spending is increasing by 40.5%. Now, 40.5% increase in spending without any comparative increase in income or growth. You can well imagine, isn't the nation on a road to bankruptcy and perdition? Taken to the basics, the federal program spending is likely to be $12,697 per person. This is the second highest level in Canadian history. Never has this happened before. Okay, I'll put this in the proper context. Per person spending was $9,153 when country was suffering from recession in 2009. That is 11 years back, 12 years back rather. So 12 years back it was 9,000 and that was the maximum that we ever had, and now it's 12,697. And the pronounced increase in spending compared to November's projections, they had projected 3 months back, shows to the government's inability to control spending. The revenue forecast for 21-22, the budget, increasing to 19.2 billion over the last 5 months. In 5 months, the increase shall be 19.2 billion. And then government is choosing to spend 54.4 billion more. So completely wiping out any gain, if there was to be any. There was not going to be there. So this represents a familiar trend. There has been no change. And the government of Liberal Party, Trudeau government, has frequently offset higher than expected revenues with new spending. So they expect the revenues to be there, which are not there. But the spending keeps on being there. I fully agree that COVID has necessitated increase in spending. Agree. But then if I look at the budget thoroughly, carefully, I find that a very small portion of program spending this year is devoted to COVID. $12,697 per head is the spending. And only 12% of that would be spent on COVID. Only 12%. Balance 88% is not related to COVID. It has nothing to do with pandemic. Then this is deficit is the highest possible imaginable. All these deficits mean more debt. And by the end of the fiscal period covered by the budget, Ottawa will have run 18 consecutive deficits, and total deficit, or rather total debt of the nation would be $1.5 trillion. Now, a population of 37 million having a debt of 1.5 trillion, is that nation not bankrupt? What does this show? Then look at the GDP debt ratio. As a matter of fact, debt to GDP ratio is a very good measure of whether we can sustain the debt. But if I compare from 1999, we'll find that this budget will show debt to GDP ratio to be highest, 51.2%. So if your GDP is 1 Your debt is 51.2. Trudeau government, when it came to power, they had promised a balanced budget. But now it doesn't plan to return to balanced budget anytime. Although 80% Canadians want balanced budget. Economic research has shown very clearly that more government debt results in slower economic growth. It increases uncertainty for households, for investors, for businesses, and imposes the cost of present spending on the future generations. So we are not only bankrupting this generation, we are bankrupting other generations to come. This budget will have extremely harmful effects on the economy. And another thing, which nobody talks about, it is a guarantee of higher taxes in the future. You can be sure that when this sort of deficit is there is a guarantee of higher taxes, not only the next budget, but in many budgets to come. Another consequence, Canadians must pay interest on the federal debt. You have not taken the debt, but you have to pay the interest. Growing debt means more tax dollars go to pay interest. Result, less money for important items like healthcare, social service, or any tax relief. So tax relief is a dream, a pipe dream, never to be realized. Then through the budget, I could not find a single word which would show an effective strategy for economic recovery. There are several big ticket items, and people looking at those titles are impressed. But when you look into it thoroughly, you will find they are hollow. Items like stimulus and national daycare. These measures are expensive, and empirical research over the last 50 years in all the OECD countries has shown that stimulus is particularly unlikely to be effective to give a jump start to the economy. It's good when you are absolutely at the bottom, but especially to a G7 country, stimulus does not jumpstart. And to strengthen the Canadian economy in long term, Trudeau government could have instead, what they should have done is reduce personal taxes on personal income. Corporate tax, okay. If you increase by 1%, 2%, 3%, but not more. But personal income has to be such that the people can sustain themselves. Businesses also need capital gains to incentivize entrepreneurship. What is an attraction to a person to go and become an entrepreneur if he's not going to be rewarded? A recent study done by a consortium of economists shows that the federal government, if it was sensible, could create 110,000 private sector jobs very easily. And how? Reduce the top marginal income tax from 33% to its previous level 20%. It used to be 20%. Now they have made it 33. Bring it back to 20% and 110,000 jobs shall be created. And when 110,000 jobs are created, that means taking average of 5 members of a family, about 600,000 people would be economically well off. So this year's federal budget was full of spending items, but no hope. Now you have got to give credit to the liberals. They're masters of communication. The news stories heralding new national child care policy are filled with graphs and charts and the median cost of the child care. The point of the graph is to show everyone how much cheaper life is going to be, and to ensure that the rest of us have the same low cost quality control. The government has earmarked $30 billion for 5 years. And all the media, of course, they have got $600 million, the media, so they'll praise it. They're going gaga. They say that's great. Now, there is a question by Mr. Singh Jaspal, very pertinent. Have they catered to any benefit for the senior citizens who are otherwise surviving hand to mouth? Well, when I was combing through the budget, I did not find even a hint of any other benefit to the senior citizens. Absolutely no. They have escaped them and they suffer the same fate as other Canadians would suffer, but no benefit. I agree with you, they are living a very tough life, surviving, depending financially on others. But the government has not given them anything at all, no hope, no respite. Now, looking at the budget, coming back, that's in detail, we can only say it's expenditure, expenditure, expenditure. That's it. And when I listen to the finance minister, she talks about a good game, how there's agreement across the political spectrum. Yes, the agreement is between all the people so that they are safe. There's no reduction of the salaries of the MPs and the ministers. Why not? There's an agreement across the political spectrum that our resources should not be touched. And then one thing I loved at when the finance minister calls it a feminist economic policy. I'm not concerned with the gender of the economic policy. I'm concerned with the reality of the economic policy. The document is silent on how this so much wanted, much praised childcare would work. The working they're not, they are going to spend this much period, but how? What is going to be the return? Pari passu, is the return going to be commensurate with the expenditure? The finance minister alludes to the fact that there is a cost sharing proposal that must be negotiated with the provinces. Now, they want to negotiate national child care with the provinces. And it is the same provinces who are facing increasing, escalating costs in healthcare. They have their own ballooning budget deficits. They have voter frustration with the increasing lockdowns, slow vaccine rollouts. What shall they negotiate about the child care? The so called new child care and early learning policy is new only in one way, that it was earlier given by Paul Martin in 2004. Actually, they have simply lifted that policy, added to that expenditure. But there are two differences, as I said. The 2021 Liberal plan to spend $30 billion is 6 times the increase of the proposed expenditure by Paul Martin. He wanted to spend $5 billion. Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland want to spend $30 billion. And then they are not going to wait. This is conditional unless the provinces agree they will not spend. But Paul Martin said no, he would negotiate with each province separately. And he had negotiated with Manitoba. So he said, okay, it's national, but I'll do it from province to province. Whichever province agrees, I'll do it. Here they said, no, we'll have this, we'll start spending, but it will be implemented only when all the 10 provinces agree. Then Freeland says, as a working mom, I can tell you it will be done. So you have it there. This will get done. How? As a matter of fact, a budget is supposed to be a policy document that has an objective, a rationale, and a plan. This budget can be read as an opening salvo in a public relation war with the provinces. Freeland has set her government up as a savior of the working mothers and the families. She is using pandemic as a policy window that increases government spending, not just as a response to the crisis, but a long-term one. It's interesting to see how her negotiations pan out. On one side, you have the first female finance minister, and you have a group of male premiers. Some premiers belong to Liberal and NDPs, but there are many conservative premiers as well. And they haven't got anything what they wanted. The premiers had asked Trudeau government to commit 35% cost sharing of the health care. The budget doesn't do that. They have just got $4 billion help for fighting COVID. Out of these huge 500 odd $1 billion loss, only 4 billion is given to the provinces to fight COVID. And the shift to 35% of provincial territorial health benefit would have stabilized the federal cost. But no, it's not. So it's a double-edged sword. If they don't sign the premiers on the child care program, they face an electoral battle, and the propaganda would be these people don't care for the children. The risk to the liberals is very low. They can use negotiations with the premiers and then get the benefit of the next election. They paint the premiers as anti-family. And it's a great distraction from ballooning federal budget deficits. You see, this is exactly basically like what used to happen in the former USSR, not Russia. They used to have a policy of restructuring the economic and political system. So proposal by Brezhnev and promoted by Gorbachev. Then they were referred to as perestroika. They referred to increased automation and labor efficiency. And they came to entail greater awareness of economic market. Now the first part, liberals are accepting. The second part, they are not. This is what I was quite impressed when I read Terence Corcoran. He's called it reverse perestroika. All the elements of perestroika minus the good ones. When Gorbachev in 1980s wanted to reform Soviet economy, his motivation mirrors the claim of the liberal platform. And you know what happened to that? It was a disaster. This is 724-page liberal budget. This is a document which I'll call to be worthy of great Gauss plans. Gauss plans used to be Soviet State Planning Committee that dominated Soviet economic life, destroying individual economy, national economy. It lays out a massive increase in government spending and debt to the country, which is suffocating. It will weaken the role of the markets and enhance the power of governments and the planners. Long back, Pierre Trudeau, the former prime minister, father of Justin Trudeau, had said, I wouldn't be prepared to think I'll be successful in arguing that communism for Canada is good at present time, but such time might come, who knows? He never knew that his son would try his level best to bring communism in a camouflage, wearing hijab. And the words of the communist enthusiast Pierre Trudeau are politically prophetic. And it is his son who is doing it. Done right, absolutely. 38 million Canadians have not rested their eyeballs upon a single media reference to the great reset, seduction of society. Not a single one. But then, as I said earlier, they got $600 million. So between 2019 and 2026, the annual liberal budget, now this is very interesting, I would see, is $725.5 billion. And the budget is 725 pages. So for each page, there is a debt of a billion. One page, $1 billion. The federal national debt will double, as I said, to 1.5 trillion. That means $38,000 for each man, women, and a child. It used to be 21,000 in the last budget. In 1 year, comes to 38,000. Shocking. There's a 0% deficit increase. This year showed. Now look at the total deficit, various prime ministers. Lester Pearson, first debt increase was 19.6%. Joe Clark, debt increased 18.3%. Brian Mulroney, 67.7%. John Kretchen, 1.8%. That was something great. Pierre Trudeau, debt increase 738.7%. Amazing coincidence. Father and son are giving the same increase. Trudeau family has transitioned Canada to a debt-ridden slave to economic globalism. And let me tell you, this budget is a recipe for economic disaster, destroying the social order. But do they care? With the help of a complacent media, even the voices, sane voices, as in the Fraser Institute and other think tanks, are being disregarded with the contempt that you have for the people who are really intelligent. And that's a tragedy of Canada. Would you listen? And would you tell your MPs? Enough is enough. Let's hope so. Thank you.